What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content I put out every single week. Sports galore over this Thanksgiving weekend. Part of that, of course, one of the games of the Premier League season. Liverpool won, Manchester City won. I want to start and focus more on the Manchester City side and kind of loop Liverpool in as I go along. I talked about this last season when City started slow, very, very similar to where they are now. Based on what you're looking at, you might be able to argue they're in a little bit better spot. Probably you're going to argue they're a little bit farther behind right now based on the advanced metrics, what they've done from a points per game standpoint. But the point is, it's close to where they were last season. Of course, they then recovered, caught, and then ultimately ran away from Arsenal. But even in all of that and winning the treble, they were not as impressive as City teams in the past. You cannot just lump all City teams under Pep Guardiola together and say that's the standard. Because this is not a 98, 99, 100 point team. Last year was not close to 98, 99, 100 points. They have taken a step back to the point where it is possible to catch them. Last season, you had an Arsenal team that played out of their minds for the first half of the season. Saliba gets hurt, they come back to earth, and really fall apart down the stretch. This season, that same Arsenal team, who has not been anywhere near as convincing, and is winning games 1-0, scoring late goals, just not being impressive, is winning the Premier League. And right there on Manchester City's heels, behind Arsenal, is a rejuvenated Liverpool who just went into the Etihad and handed Manchester City their first non-victory at home in the calendar year 2023. I will take the chances of this Arsenal team and this Liverpool team over last year's Arsenal team any day of the week in terms of catching City. And part of that is because City has opened the door. Somebody still has to walk through it and show that they can be just as good and go toe-to-toe with City for 38 games. We're just not going to know the answer to that question yet. But right now, City are banged up. You've got a Jeremy Doku who has been really, really good, but also doesn't fit what Pep Guardiola wants to do. So you're seeing this kind of weird philosophical change, and maybe this is just the next evolution, but they don't have control the way that they have in the past. That was the thing that they had finally mastered in the Champions League. And now you got that wild 4-4 with Chelsea, and this game where they're giving the ball away and still probably deserve to win, but they don't look as dominant. The advanced metrics will back this up. And now, all of a sudden, Arsenal are guaranteed to at least be even in head-to-head. Liverpool have a chance to win the head-to-head. And I always talk about how important that is for the teams trying to catch the favorites. Whether that's Bayern in the Bundesliga, PSG, City, whoever. That part of the equation is being fulfilled right now. And of course, there's always the caveat that City could roll 10, 15 straight wins off and just not make this interesting. But if there's a season to get them, it might be this one. De Bruyne is going to come back at some point. They are a team that's not particularly deep and a team dealing with injuries. So they don't have the kind of depth off the bench that, and I've made this point before, look at Liverpool, the weapons they can bring off the bench. Look at the impact Arsenal subs are making, even if you're not as convinced by them as from an individual standpoint. This could very well end up being a title race. We got to wait and see on it because the question is, can you stay with City for 38 games? We just won't know the answer. But you look at this game and City were probably the better team, but not a lot of clear-cut chances. You've got the goal that they did score that Haaland finished really well, but that was a story of Alisson slipping and Liverpool's defense completely falling asleep. How the ball moved that quickly without any kind of real opposition is baffling. And to me, that's the bigger story of this goal. Is it's not Allison. It's the inability to stop the ball and to leave Holland in that spot where he can then make that run and open himself up to score that goal. And Liverpool do have those defensive moments. They were going after Alexander Arnold because Jeremy Doku is exactly the kind of player who can take advantage of that matchup, although he is not a Pep player, which is the other interesting part of this and the kind of the tactical evolution that is either happening or being forced upon City because they just don't have the same players they did before. Doku is not a possession-based control guy. And Jack Grealish is. But Doku's getting the starts right now. And you open yourself up to the 4-4 against Chelsea, games like this. And so it's too early to draw any real conclusions other than this Liverpool team is for real. I believe what Arsenal are doing is much more sustainable. And that the rate that these teams are going, if this is what it's going to take to win a title, absolutely Arsenal and Liverpool can get there. The question is whether City can kick it into another gear. Because they did it last season and the slow start didn't matter. I just refuse to believe it is inevitable that happens. Because there are vulnerabilities here. And teams are exploiting them. And teams are now beating them head to head. Or at least getting a draw on the away end, if you're Liverpool here. And some of City's most dangerous opportunities in these games came from, Allison mistakes and close calls. You're not guaranteed to get that every game. It's not like City created all these opportunities. And so that's really what I came away from this thinking about is maybe Liverpool were fortunate to walk away with a point, but they weren't played off the field or anything. And these drop points are starting to add up. Anytime you can take points off of City, anytime City drop points, the bar gets lowered. And even last season, and it looks like it's going to be the case this season, the bar got lowered to the point where somebody was able to reach it. Now, nobody did last season, but it is within the realm of possibility. Because this is not a Liverpool team that's going to go 97, 98 points the way that some of those other teams did. But in the mid-80s, absolutely Liverpool can get there. Absolutely Arsenal can get there. City are going to have to do something different, which of course they're more than capable of, to change the complexion of this and really make themselves the clear-cut favorites. Of course you're going to pick them because they're right there. It's not like they're 10 points back or something. And even then, most people were still picking them. But this is the best combination of events for me to get a title race. That is not simply which of these teams is going to blink first. Those couple that we saw between City and Liverpool. This is much more. You've got three teams involved. Teams are dropping points. You don't have to be perfect every week. Maybe City raised the bar to the point where Arsenal and Liverpool do have to be perfect every week to stay in this title race. That's not where we are right now, though. And both of them have already taken points off of City. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quickly, I'm going to do an MLS semifinal, MLS conference final preview video later this week. But events transpired in Cincinnati that I wanted to at least address because they don't relate to the semifinal matchup in FC Cincinnati moving forward. And when things like this happen, I want to share some thoughts on them. So, Cincinnati scored a goal in the 94th minute to beat the Philadelphia Union, advance in the playoffs. It appears that Ian Murphy, in the build-up to the goal, he heads the ball over that ultimately kind of kickstarts what ends up being the goal. He appears to be offside. Everybody thinks he's offside. Danny Higginbotham on the broadcast. Jim Curtin said after the game, everybody on their bench, everybody who saw the video on the iPad thought he was offside. Everybody thought he was offside based on an imperfect camera angle. Goes to VAR. Kevin Stott says, no clear and obvious error. Goal is good. Cincinnati wins. I want to start by revisiting a point I've made before. You cannot use imperfect camera angles, screenshots, to definitively say a clear and obvious error has been made. Because you don't know. How many times have we seen examples, going back to the World Cup, the Men's World Cup, where it looked like the ball was out, but actually it wasn't. It looks like they were offside, but actually they weren't. The idea that this is some kind of catastrophic refereeing mistake, to me, is flat out wrong. There are two parts of this. One is the transparency. The other part is the trust. There has got to be trust and the benefit of the doubt given to referees that they know how to do their job. That every time it looks like something other than the call that was made, that it's not some kind of cataclysmic mistake, but that there's a reason for it. The Luis Diaz goal notwithstanding. The second part, and I've seen some images where if you actually properly set up the camera angle, it looks like it's super, super close. Maybe he's still offside. Is it a clear and obvious error? I would argue no. Therefore, the correct call was made. But the other part of this. It appears after the game was over on the broadcast, if I am reading and understanding correctly, I, full disclosure, turned the game off after it finished, that VAR had an angle that was definitive. And that angle was just never provided to the general public. That's the transparency part of this. People have to be willing to trust referees that they're doing their job, and referees, and I know the referees aren't necessarily in control of distributing the camera angle. That's more of a broadcast and MLS problem. But if you're going to make a call that everybody thinks is wrong, it would help everybody, including you, to be able to actually explain why. And the explanation given to the pool reporter in the kind of just the MLS policy in terms of how referee questions are answered after the game was a definition of onside. The explanation being he was in line with the second to last defender. That's not the point here. The point is that nobody thinks he was actually in line with the second to last defender. So how is he actually in line with the second to last defender? If you're going to do something that goes against what everybody is thinking and what the pictures say, again, I don't trust these pictures and you shouldn't either. From a refereeing standpoint, do yourself a favor, and from an MLS standpoint, protect your referees by being able to actually show the explanation as to why. And this is where semi-automated technology, where the lines that the Premier League has are very, very helpful, because you can actually see, oh, wow, it looked like he was offside, but he really was onside. And then this is all put to bed. But because none of that happened, there was no closure. It was basically a, hey, trust us, he was onside. Which both things can be true at the same time. People have to be willing to trust that in order for VAR to work. Because we live in this world where everybody now just, it seems like, wants to show VAR got it wrong, VAR got it wrong, VAR got it wrong. When the actual amount of mistakes VAR make, nowhere near as bad as people make it seem. Again, outside of Luis Diaz one, that was abysmal. So we as the soccer community have got to be able to meet refs in the halfway for VAR to work. The other part of this is you've got to be able to explain the decisions so that people aren't there left baffled and actually can get some closure here. Both of those things can be true at the same time. That there needs to be the benefit of the doubt given to referees, and that people are entitled to an explanation and to see what the call is actually being based on. It seems like in this case, neither of those things happened, and so there's frustration, confusion, lack of communication, but ultimately, it's Cincinnati goes through. Nobody seems to actually know if the goal was good or not. At this point, it doesn't matter. So that's really where I wanted to go with this. Is there is a way for VAR to work. I firmly believe that, but it takes a collective effort. And I also believe of raising of the clear and obvious error bar and communicating that to everybody and getting some consistency. There are a lot of things that need to happen for VAR to actually work in an effective way. But what is not helpful, I guess I'll end with this, is taking a still screenshot from an angle that is clearly not actually in line and then using that to definitively say a mistake was made. Because we've seen how deceiving those pictures can be. And so we've got to just trust the referees. Now, you as a fan, as a media member, as a supporter of the sport, also deserve better than just trust the referee. That's the other part of this. That's the transparency. Unfortunately for the Union, they didn't get any of that. And so, season over. Cincinnati moves on. Like I said, I will have more sort of on-field content, a preview, some thoughts about the 4 teams remaining. We've already got a fantastic Eastern Conference final set as I'm recording this. Really looking forward to next weekend. So be on the lookout for that semifinal preview. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'll see you next time.